Pre-season testing of the ABB FIA Formula E World Championship has almost come to a close here in Valencia, and it's given us a first look at some comparative timings between the teams. It's allowed us to see how the rookies are getting on, how their lap times are matching up, and also how new powertrains, or lack of, are performing for the teams on this circuit. Now, as we know, testing isn't exactly a fair representation of what Formula E circuits are all about, but what it does tell us is how close and competitive the grid for the next season is likely to be. And what we've seen is that it's looking very tight. So with that in mind, let's take a look back at everything that's been going on over the last few days in Valencia.
Formula E's return to the circuit brought with it a number of changes. Drivers have moved teams, new rookies have joined the grid, there's new liveries, and some new powertrains. The morning session of day one saw the drivers head out on a wet track, and it wasn't long before some found trouble. Sergio Seti Camara and Sebastian Buemi found themselves stuck in the gravel at turn 2, having to be pulled out and limp their cars back to the pits. And Mitch Evans in his updated Jaguar racing car introduced himself to the tyres at turn 6 with a suspected software and braking issue, also needing recovery.
We had a bit of a failure that sent me into the wall. Hopefully nothing too bad, but yeah, it wasn't a nice feeling.
Rocket Venturi's Edoardo Mortara topped the morning session with a 1:18.1, followed very closely by reigning champion Antonio Felix da Costa, just 0.03 of a second shy, with Oliver Turvey completing the top 3 times. Only a tenth of a second separated 18 cars by the end of the session, meaning things were likely to change in a much drier afternoon. And that's exactly what happened. Within minutes of being out on the track, we saw lap times 5 seconds quicker than that of the morning session. Andre Lotterer topped the timings, giving the Tag Heuer Porsche Formula E team a successful end to day one of testing. The DS Techeetah drivers Vern and da Costa followed on the timesheet, bringing the pace we saw last season to pre-season testing.
And yeah, it's obviously wet today. It's been a slippery few laps so far. It's been really actually a lot of fun to drive these cars in the wet.
Perhaps the most notable takeaway from day one was that all 3 rookies finished in the top 10, regardless of a last-minute visit to the gravel trap by Norman Nato, and Nick Cassidy just over 1.5 tenths behind da Costa, once again impressing during testing in an Envision Virgin racing car. On day 2, drivers and teams took advantage of 3 hours of improved conditions after the drizzly driving of day 1 to work through their programs and rack up the laps. Antonio Felix da Costa topped the morning session, showing consistent pace from the day before, and Alex Lynn in his Mahindra racing car topped the afternoon session, but only by 0.07 of a second, just about breaking into the 111s as all teams ran their race and full power qualifying programs. The biggest story of day 2, however, being that all 24 drivers on the grid were within a second of each other, which is incredibly exciting going into the season for a number of reasons, but more on that later. Making up the rest of the top 3 after Lynn were the BMW I Andretti Motorsport pairing of Maximilian Guenther and Jake Dennis, with BMW showing similar pace at the circuit Ricardo Tormo as the previous 2 seasons of testing.
So far so good. It's great to be back with the whole competition here on track. We've got a very good program for these 3 days. It's important to learn as much as we can. We really concentrate on our own and try to make us as ready as we can be for the race season.
After a busy day of filming and media duties, the final day of testing began, running as one long, extended 6-hour session. A fleeting red flag around the halfway point was caused by a spin for Dragon Penske Autosport driver Sergio Seti Camara in Sector 3, finding the gravel trap for the second time in 3 days of testing. Aside from that, it was heads down for the drivers as they steered through their testing programs, counting off more than 1,800 laps between them. Audi Sport App Schaeffler's new full-time signing René Rast racked up more time on track than anyone else, counting off 98 laps and covering 392 kilometers alone as he got to grips with the e-tron FE07 and the new powertrain in the manufacturer's team's last season in Formula E. At the end of the session, it was another successful day of testing for BMW I Andretti Motorsport. Maximilian Guenther topped the overall timings for the 2nd season in a row, and a promising performance from the manufacturer team's new powertrain as well. The young German edged out Lynn's previous benchmark with a 1:11.7, with only 3/4 of a second between the lap times of the entire grid. Following Guenther by only 0.05 of a second were the Dragon Penske Autosport pair of Sergio Seti Camara and Nico Müller, despite still running their Season 6 powertrain until April next year. Impressive work from the pair. Valencia has been kind to BMW in the past, with their drivers topping the timings in the previous 2 seasons of testing, and interestingly going on to grab pole positions in the opening races in Diriyah on both occasions. So it'll be interesting to see if we see a third year of pace and performance carried over from testing to round 1 for the German manufacturer. The opening race may not be taking place in the same location as the past 2 occasions, but Guenther won in Santiago, the host of this season's opener last season. So could we be looking at an early favourite in a season where a strong start may be crucial? Cheetah reigning champ Antonio Felix da Costa, Mitch Evans, Pascal Wehrlein, Oliver Rowland, Jean-Eric Vergne and Oliver Turvey followed Guenther, all breaking the 1:12 barrier, while less than a quarter of a second separated the top 10 runners, with 8 different teams represented. Now that's the close competition we've come to know and love in this championship reaching new levels. Could this mean we may see another streak of multiple pole positions and race winners? To make things even closer, it wasn't just the top 10 who were tight in the timings come the end of the final session. All 24 runners lapped within just 0.7 of a second of each other, and every driver except Lucas de Grassi was, incredibly, covered by little over half a second. Testing can't always tell us much, but close comparative timings like this suggest we may see a real mixed bag in qualifying this season, with race wins coming down to driver skill, pure racecraft, and all of the elements that make Formula E so unique. Street racing prowess, energy management, attack mode, and the strategies around them. This could be a very interesting season.
So there we go, pre-season testing all wrapped up. And if there's one thing that we've learned, is that season 7 might just be the most competitive season yet. Stay tuned to the Formula E social channels and website for more content, and we'll see you in January for rounds 1 and 2 in Santiago.